I'd like to call our meeting to order. Ms. Steele, if you please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Hutson?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Here.
Mr. Bazzani?
Present.
Mr. Nicosia?
Here.
All here.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. At this time, we ask that you stand for our invocation, our pledge, led by Mr. Tony Nicosia.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another opportunity to come and do the business of Gloucester County. Oh, we thank you for the citizens that are here tonight, God. God, I ask that you rest your hand upon the Catholic Church as they lost the Pope this morning. And God, I ask that you be with us and go with us through the rest of this budget process. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Nicosia. At this time, we will move to our public comment period. We ask that you limit your comments to the work session agenda only, and please limit your comments to 10 minutes or less. 3 minutes or less. 10 works. No. Public comments.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Steele, Mr. Wilmot, Howard Mowry, York. This coming fiscal year is a nightmare. With this said, this board needs to take a hard look at the constitutions, national and state, and determine what is essential and what is social engineering, or more bluntly, socialism or Marxism. Three major functions before anything else are the Sheriff's Department, Fire and Rescue, and the Enterprise System, Water. All of the rest could go on a 3-day work week with benefits, and the county will still function. Remember, the toll is now officially coming off, so look out for Gloucester. Millions are to be made now in vacant land sales, thus major development. The fire department debt is a done deal on Main Street. Forget about anything else. Our water department is in critical condition. Without immediate solutions and new hires to meet all critical functions, now the system will fail. Looking back in 2020, we had 23 employees, only 2 working in the ditch. Currently, we have 23 personnel. 5 years later, 9 in the water plant, 3 in admin, 1 in IT, 5 supervisors, including the director, and 5 utility workers, of which 2 may be in the ditch. As spoken before, we need 10 new employees for this water department, not sewer, to bring this system modern, identifying all asset items, repairing, maintaining, and ensuring that GSI has up-to-date information as required to support the entire system. To not begin with this process with this upcoming budget would be remiss on your part. Other departments will have to be pared down to bring this department up to current standards and not by Band-Aid operations. One item in the expenditure file under maintenance auto, you need to make room for fuel usage. This needs to be accomplished by a separate account number. And as on the lighter side, I have decided to be the head of Gloucester Doge and need 5 volunteers, 1 from each district, and the fun will begin. What are tax dollars being spent on? A challenge. Thank you for the time. Oh, we don't want to do that, do we? Damn, can you?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Murray. Next.
My name's Randy Orga out of the York District. First of all, I want to say thank you for everything y'all do. I know y'all hear a lot of different things from a lot of different people, and I know it's not an easy job to do, but I'd like to get into this referendum. You know, this firehouse could have been built, not included in this referendum, and it was agreed upon with the Board of Supervisors for, what, $12 million at a low interest rate. Now, it's for $12 million. Now we're looking at a $21 million. That's $8 million difference that the citizens of Gloucester County are going to have to pay to build a firehouse that could have already been built. They were already been in it, which is a great big asset to the citizens of Gloucester County. We need them. Those guys work hard. I don't understand why it was smoke screened into the referendum. So once it didn't pass, you can't get that small loan for another 5 years. To spend $30 million on Parks and Rec. It's a good thing it probably didn't pass, because we'd be getting taxed on that like you're getting ready to try to tax us again for the pay raises. Not saying that they don't need pay raises. The problem is the people that pay the taxes don't always get pay raises to pay you to get your pay raise. So, you know, we just need to do a little bit better. We need to do a little bit better for the citizens of Gloucester County instead of pet projects. Now we got a water treatment plant problem, and I'm hearing, and I don't know, I may be wrong, it's going to cost between $60 and $80 million to fix that. Well, here's another tax increase. I mean, the tax increases just don't stop. We can't even get the potholes filled underneath the Coleman Bridge trying to get filled for the last year and a half, so people can put their boats in the water. I can't get a pothole filled. If the county will write me a check, I'll go down there to Peninsula Hardwood Mulch and buy some rock and go down there and put it in there myself, so people can actually take a boat and put it in the water down there. We had a hot dog stand down there, but we can't put a boat in the water. You know, the answer is not just taxes, taxes, taxes. I work for this county, and a lot of times we didn't get pay raises for 2 and 3 years, and I know how it feels. But when you're making $250,000 a year, out of the whole scale of things, are you the one that needs the pay increase, or could you forget your tax increase and give it to the lower level people that you're complaining about that are leaving? Maybe that's a reason that they're leaving. Figure out how to share some of this money around. Everything doesn't have to be the way that it's been for the last 30 years. And you're talking about raising taxes. Where's that $1.2 million windfall going to go if it gets retroed back to January 1st if y'all vote on that? Is that money included in any of the pay raise that you want to give to the citizens? Where's that money lie? Thank you for everything that y'all do.
Thank you, sir. Next. Is anyone next?
I'm Diane Jones from the Ware District. You said to address the things in this work session agenda. I want to address the carnival agreement. Is that, but you're gonna publicize your closed meetings? Is that the carnival agreement? What is a carnival agreement?
There's no closed meeting. Yes, they're going to talk about it. So go ahead.
Okay, well, if you want so much parks and recreation, try getting people who have private organizations like the Compass out in Whitestone, to bring their businesses here and create bowling alleys or places to be entertained. But we're not entertained by a county administrator whose salary keeps going up and up and up and up, and the county keeps going bankrupt. You're not a good administrator if you're doing that. If you don't know how to balance a budget, you should resign and find somebody who does.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
you're not here for that.
Okay, well, that's part of the,
Thank
isn't
you,
that
Ms.
part of
Jones.
the,
Thank you, Ms. Jones. But just,
I have
we're not here to
two and a
discuss
half
it.
minutes left.
yeah, but we're not here to discuss the county administrators.
I think what the
Okay,
chair
we're
means
talking
is,
about money
We
expenditures.
understand that, we do know. No, no
think-
personal tax on it, anyone.
I think what the chair means is that you direct your comments to the chair and the board, and not to anyone else personally.
Okay, thank you. All right, I stand corrected. The public schools need the money, but they don't need CRT, DEI, now disguised as MTSS. And believe me, the Office of the President is being made aware of this and will stop the funds accordingly if it doesn't change. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Is this on? Okay. I have to amend my speech here to take the admonition from the chairman. Good evening. My name is Susan Austin. I'm from the York District, and I'd like to give you an idea of several ways possible to cut the budget you're voting on. It has come to my attention from an impeccable source that we purchased some AI software. By we, I mean Gloucester County, and was recommended by our unnamed county administrator. I'm asking the boss to reveal to we the citizens the purchase price. This package is meant to spy on us as we go about our business here in Gloucester. When it was voted on, it was met with no objections from the voting members of the boss. I would like to think I'm wrong in this, but I don't think I am. My suggestion is to rip out this spying software from its current placement and either destroy it, return it to the manufacturer for a refund, or maybe place it where phone calls between boss members can be recorded so we can hear what you really think. We know we're being lied to when nobody says a word about items to cut in the budget, lying by omission. I also will repeat that I heard that the unnamed county administrator is being given a good salary increase, and this is her lasting legacy, is how to spend money. I want to thank you for this because remember the upcoming midterm elections. Another thing, who is being trained to fulfill the job of county administrator? Would it be possible that candidates be floated before the citizenry, before this new person takes office, is being selected? I think that would be a good idea. We could also find out what the salary ranges are and maybe go accordingly. I think you owe the citizens of this county that right to know. I think the above that I've mentioned should help in reducing current and future budgets. That and a grand jury investigation, that might help too. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Anyone else? Any other public comments? Anything come in, Ms. Whitney?
Kenny Hogg from Gloucester Point. A little over 30 years ago, Gloucester found it necessary to invest in building a surface water treatment plant and Beaver Dam Reservoir. This investment was necessary due to the growth in the county that began after the toll was removed from the bridge in 1976. Growth almost stopped when the toll was reimposed in 1996. At that time, taxes here were quite a bit higher than today and rising due to the need for expanded water and sewer systems, a new courthouse, a new high school, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools. The court system, sheriff's department, social services, and other mandated government activities had to be expanded. Somewhere between 2005 and 2009, administrative priorities steered off the path of building and maintaining necessary infrastructure and providing necessary and mandated governmental services to a path of neglecting our infrastructure and prioritizing parks, recreation, tourism, community engagement, pay raises, propping up local non-government organizations, funding regional planning district commissions, producing podcasts, and other forms of marketing to advertise how great Gloucester is. Now we learn the toll will be removed from the bridge sometime this year. What have you done to prepare for this inevitably that has existed over since the toll was reimposed in 1996? When it comes to our water and sewer infrastructure, you have done nothing but let the system degrade to the point where nearly $100 million or more in capital funding is needed to bring the system up to a reliable standard. A fully qualified, capable, and motivated director who is significantly experienced in water and sewer disciplines is needed ASAP. The director will need a strong assistant. At least 3 additional employees are needed now to perform normal day-to-day maintenance on the water distribution system assets. Additional employees are needed to conduct asset inventories of the water and sewer systems. Did you know new billing software is now needed for the new AMI meters? Why wasn't this possibility vetted before buying the new meters? I suggest looking into water and sewer asset management software that will solve the billing issues, align with the current GIS, and put the utilities on the right track to improve asset management. Our infrastructure has suffered neglect long enough. It is time to reevaluate priorities and liabilities. Cutting 3% from each department budget is not a good approach because some important departments like utilities are underfunded and do not have anything left to cut. Significantly cutting all the non-mandated and costly social activities previously mentioned is where your focus on cutting should be. Chris Parsons from Gloucester Point District. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for reading my comments and concerns. As a resident of the Bena Gloucester Point District of this wonderful county, I'd like to share my thoughts about the following. Proposed real estate and personal property tax increase. We can't keep taxing and taxing our citizens without fiscal accountability and responsibility. This should be the priority. As a business owner myself, I do not know of a single business that can keep borrowing and spending and keep raising its prices before the business fails. It is unsustainable. The proposed termination of the George P. Coleman Bridge tolls beginning January 1st, 2026. If passed, this will cause an influx of new residents to the Gloucester County and will create a much larger tax base for real estate, personal property, sales, food, and other local taxes. Utilities proposal. Water and sewer services are essential. Rather than appropriating funds for other non-essential projects, for example, replacing windows and carpets in government buildings, the upgrade and expansion of water and sewer services should be the #1 priority of this county administration. As it stands, there is a small amount of usage by residents compared to the large amount of usage by the hospital, medical facilities, government offices, restaurants, grocery stores, and other businesses. There are large numbers of well and septic systems in use. There is an increase in new residential development that requires an efficient working water and sewer system. That said, increasing rates for current users of the existing limited systems is a Band-Aid approach. Thank you for taking the time to read my comments this evening. It is my hope that the board will consider not only my comments and concerns, but those of all Gloucester County taxpayers before making the final vote on the FY26 budget, not only regarding the consequences of raising taxes, but also how best to allocate the money currently available. Buddy Riley, Abingdon District. Board members, I certainly realize you have another challenging budget. Please keep your increase as little as possible. Us senior citizens and community on fixed incomes are having to tighten our belts, and hopefully our supervisors will do likewise. Thank you for your service to Gloucester County. I know how tough these budgets are. Catherine Chaplin, 8477 Little England Road. Residents of Gloucester County are already dealing with rising food prices, increases in utility costs, and expensive medical costs. This is not the time for an increase in taxes in Gloucester County. The Board of Supervisors should explore alternative revenue generating strategies such as more efficient budget allocation. There should also be a priority on reducing unnecessary expenses. Thank you for your time. Nikki West, Achilles. No, I do not agree with a real estate tax increase. The market is strained now. The expansion of county infrastructure needs to come from grants or other sources. Water and sewer are well past due in low-lying and waterfront areas. I have not seen a true useful expansion in 30 years, and I'm not convinced of a tax increase would even be spent on the expansion of water and sewer, nor do I think that amount of money would even come close to covering the cost of that size expansion, even over 5 years. I do think the ball has been dropped on this issue. I know the sewer is undersized, and the county needs to come up with a plan quickly. Offering a few commercial incentives to bring more business on 17 would increase the tax basis and not overwhelm the sewer system, cleaning up Route 17 by those owners who make county more attractive. I think our representatives need to dive in and look for federal grants to help this county at this point. We don't have time for another 12-year plan that did not work. Margaret Coffey, Ware District. I would be at this meeting, but I have COVID. I know you feel you need to raise taxes, but I also hope you are aware of the strain you are putting on older people at this time who are on strict budgets while trying to live in their own homes. Due to the unsure times we are in, maybe there just might be a better way than finding the few extra bits of money left in our pockets at the end of our payday. I wish you would take this under serious consideration. Thank you. That was the last one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, we're gonna move on to our work session agenda. And first we have Gloucester County Public Schools Transportation Update. Ms. Tanya Decker, Director of Transportation.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. They asked me to come tonight to just give you an update on some questions and concerns that were brought forth about school transportation. Would you like me to begin, or do you have specific questions?
Yes.
Okay. So there were some questions about the efficiencies made to Gloucester County Public Schools transportation. I took leadership of the Transportation Department in 2019. At the time that I did so, Gloucester County had 118 school buses, 110 school bus routes that ran daily, and 126 employees. As of today's date, we have decreased our fleet size from 118 school buses to 76 school buses for a reduction of 35.6%. Our routes have been optimized using larger capacity school buses to create a routing composition that includes 68 school bus routes to service our students and families of Gloucester County. We did that not only through larger school buses, by working with leadership team to create a two-tiered bell system. By just moving time back by about 5 minutes, we were able to get all students on the same bus for high school, middle school, and then that bus goes and picks up the elementary schools to transport them. By doing so, we were able to decrease our employee size from 126 employees to currently I have a reduction of about 22% to 98 current employees. Routes have been optimized by about 38% reduction to we run about 68 routes a day from the 100 plus. We were able to utilize funding and grants through the federal government to purchase 19 school buses since 2019. Also able to utilize grant funding to create a communication system using the Motorola radio system on our school buses, allowing us to be able to communicate with the drivers, reducing our missing student time. This is usually a time that a student will get on the wrong school bus or get off at a wrong stop, from about 47 minutes to usually we can locate those students in between 4 to 6 minutes. And that's very important when you're a parent and you don't quite know where your student is. We were able to participate in the Bus Patrol camera project, allowing us to upgrade our camera systems with live feeds, also GPS systems at no cost to the county. So those are the efficiencies that we were able to make with a savings in grants and funding of a little over $3.9 million. We are asking for buses to be purchased for our special needs and to continue optimization of our school bus routing. The current projected price that I was giving was $1.3 million. With the current pricing of school buses, that would purchase approximately 8 buses. I know that there was some question about what the purchase price. I'm working on the current specs, but it looks to be about $166,000 to $168,000, and of course we can negotiate. When it a question was asked about utilizing smaller vehicles to pick up students in outlying areas of the county. So we do, whenever possible, utilize white fleet vehicles to do so, especially if it's a student that attends a special program or may not be successful on a regular school bus. We do, however, have an aging white fleet. Most of those vehicles are donated through the county for older police vehicles, so on and so forth. And they have become much more expensive to repair as those parts are harder to find. And that's what I had. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Bazzani.
So, Ms. Decker, thank you so much for that presentation. It's amazing to me that you were able to reduce your costs by 36%, right, if I'm correct?
Yes.
Reduce your buses from 118 down to 76.
Yes, sir.
And you didn't lose any folks doing that, did you?
We did lose employees. I've reduced in my department, the employees have been reduced from, I gotta go back in my notes.
Well, that's okay. The process improvements.
22%.
22%. So the process improvements were part of that, your 36% reduction, right? The process
Yes.
improvements. It seems to me that, you know, the county can do a process interview of their processes to see what can be efficient, what can be not efficient. I think one speaker's talked about a Doge team looking at, you know, how efficient can the county get. It's probably too late to do it for this budget, but it's something that we can probably do this year to look at what is efficient. What can we get by with? Because we do have a serious problem with our water treatment system.
Yes.
We do have a very serious problem with that, and it needs to be fixed. And so I appreciate what you are saying tonight. I have no questions. I think I'm delighted at the fact that you have made the effort to reduce costs for our county. Thank you.
And we have done that without compromising any services. And many of you know, services have increased in the level of service that we provide our students. Parents are able to get text notifications when the bus is nearing their house. Our buses are larger, they're newer, they are temperature controlled, which I know is a huge plus to a lot of our little guys on the bus. So we've been able to do that while keeping a high level of service.
So just one more quick question. So the reduction in personnel, was that just through attrition or through process improvement saying we don't need these people here? Or what is the flavor of that reduction in force?
Some was through attrition and some was just making hard decisions.
Okay, thank you. Not hard to do, is it?
Yes, sir. Mr. Gibson?
Well, thank you, Ms. Deckard. I really appreciate the overview and want to thank you for all of your hard work on behalf of the Transportation Department. You have a very, very big job to manage all the buses and just the complexity of getting all of these students to the correct school safely is a huge job, and you do it well. My children have used the bus system, and they have always had very good professional drivers and have gotten there safely, so thank you for that. I know that one of the struggles with bus transportation is getting good drivers and getting reliable drivers. And I know that the pay was increased recently, but where is the bus driver pay in Gloucester compared to surrounding counties? And what do you feel that an additional increase would give you more stability with your driver force?
So in the past, we have been able to utilize some of our savings to stay competitive when it comes to compensation. Drivers can be very difficult to find. CDL is a very huge responsibility for the average person. Currently, our biggest competitor is just right across the bridge. With the tolls going away, I think that barrier to competition will go away as well. Their starting rate, I believe, is currently $21 an hour. We're asking to not meet that, but stay in a competitive margin so that we can continue to keep our higher level of service. We have been able to be successful in just recruitment. I feel that we have a great team because we invite and highly train the individuals that we keep behind the wheel. But they're also, as you know, with increases in things at the grocery store, bills, et cetera, it is important that we recognize that the wage would have to increase in order for us to stay competitive.
And where are we now? I know we're at over 20, or is it right at 20?
Our current wage
hour,
is
excuse
$18.
Okay.
And that's for a contract step one. I believe a competitive rate would be $20 an hour, starting at that step. That would allow for us to stay in a competitive margin with a smaller school division, of course, but also with the other benefits that we offer in the county with, allowing them to stay in routes that they're comfortable with, and allowing them to be a part of a greater team, because we do participate a lot, especially with Gloucester County. So I
think
feel
that might be, actually, Mr. Hartley might be able to address that. Is the raise to 20 part of the school board's budget for this year?
Proposal, yes, sir.
Oh, that's a proposal.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Decker, Mr. Hartley, what is the law, the ruling on how far away from a school do you have to be before you have to have a school bus?
Currently, we don't have a walk zone in Gloucester County.
But what is required to have a walk zone?
So that would be a determination made by the board to determine the safety aspects of a walk zone. Of course, when I heard the question come up at the last board meeting, I did do an analysis of our school system. You, of course, wouldn't want students walking in the Petsworth area. You, of course, wouldn't want students walking up major thoroughfares like Route 17. You'd want to be very cautious, especially that time of day on T.C. Walker. There are about 3 schools and potentially a small portion of Gloucester High that would be eligible for a walk zone. However, that does not come without a cost. There would have to be a clear and safe pathway, and in most school divisions that have walk zones, you would have to hire crossing guards. These are individuals, of course, that would keep eye on our students, and they wouldn't then be entitled not only to compensation but benefits as well. I personally feel that the school bus is the safest way to travel, especially when it gets pretty dark and we don't have a lot of sidewalks and pathways in Gloucester for them to access the school buildings.
Ms. Decker?
Yes.
What the total number of students? How many actually ride the school bus?
I would say,
School buses?
so we do a load count every year. Now, there is a more technical way to do this. So we do a load count every year. I have software that tracks every single student in Gloucester County. And then we take those students, at the beginning of the year, we overload the buses by a percentage rate. Then we do an actual load count every October. The average load size of our high school buses is about 32 students, 32 to 38. Middle school, it goes up to about 42 to 46. And elementary school, you're looking at about 55 to 62 students per 77 passenger bus. We do have some routes that are strategically placed that can be doubled in order for us to mitigate shortages, like if someone's out. So we can double that pretty quickly. Does that make sense?
Have you noticed that more students are being driven to school or driving to school than since 2019?
We saw a big uptick after the pandemic. In the last 2 years, we've seen that kind of correct itself. Page was one that I was watching, and I think we're down to about 100 cars there. And that includes, like, some of those are just special programs, like the kids are going in to help tutor or some of the other students. But the vast majority of our students do utilize the school bus. At the high school, you're going to see the most fluctuation because, I'm trying to find, so Sally might be able to drive today, but her report card might come out and she can't drive next week. So you'll see most fluctuation there, yeah.
Take the keys. Yes, sir.
Follow up on your question. In the high school where students are capable of driving in, what percentage, I think maybe she answered that question, I'm not certain. What percentage of total high school, driver-eligible high school students are riding the bus? And how many are driving their own cars in?
So I can tell you
And
the
secondly, you charge a fee for parking at the high school?
I would not be able to answer the fee question. Would you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There's a fee.
There is a fee.
There's a fee.
And
Okay, so what's the percentage of high school students who are foregoing the buses and driving their own cars? I mean, you said you have a 77 passenger bus. How full is that bus when it comes time to go home?
so a 77 passenger bus means there's 3 kids to every seat. It's comfortable to have two high school kids to every seat. I have probably, out of the 25 buses that serve Gloucester High School, probably 6 to 7 of those buses that are topped out, where they can't take any more students, and then probably 4 buses that are less, but most of those buses serve the lower density population area up north, like in the Petsworth area. If that makes sense.
So that's the most efficient way then? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Nicosia?
So, yes, as a matter of fact, if you ever come to Gloucester High School on open house night, you see how lucrative the parking spots are.
Yes.
Because there is only so many parking spots, because they will only park so many cars, and they're standing in line getting their parking passes. And Mr. Harley can attest to this. Some of the staff is using the student parking lot currently because of construction. So not as many students are eligible to park as would be if we weren't using their parking spots. Now, my question has to do with your aging fleet. What would, in your estimation, what would be better? Because I see the cars coming in and out in the morning time, picking up kids and stuff. Is it cars or vans that would suit your operation better?
Do you mind if I grab my water really quick? Okay, so buses definitely. The reason for the buses, we're able to utilize those over a larger span of projects. So the 77 passenger buses, for instance, they not only save us during the school day, sports and athletics, as you well know. When I first arrived, it took about 4 of our school buses to take our football team and our cheerleaders to any locality that they were challenging, okay? Now we can do that same trip with 2 buses. Reduces us by staffing, also reduces by fuel. The newer buses get about 6 to 8 miles per gallon. The older buses that we retire out get about they're getting like 6 to 8 miles per gallon. The newer buses get about 16. So we're saving in fuel and we're saving on staff. The vans help us with students that live in very low population areas. So they might live down a street that takes us a good 30 minutes to get down or get to them and their peers, and we pick them up in a van and transport them because it's much faster than having a bus go way down that street to pick up those students. We also utilize those vans for programs that are not in the norm for Gloucester High School or any of our other Gloucester County Public Schools. These are programs like the Center for Autism. These are programs like Governor's School, CBGS, that we can utilize those smaller vans to get the same job done, but we don't have to have a CDL bus driver in place, and there's not as many students, so it makes sense to send those vans. And it costs a lot less money in the long run when you update your fleet, if you have a good replacement program. Because, for instance, our most expensive repair group right now is our 2013 to 2015 model buses. That small amount of buses is equal in repair and maintenance to the entire fleet if you discount that small number of buses.
I guess I want to get the vote if I was going to replace your automobile fleet, not your buses, but your automobile fleet. And I said, let's get the most bang for our buck. Would it be, so you answered part of the second part. The first part is, though, which would benefit you? A fleet of vans or a fleet of cars?
Cars. For every one minivan I put on the road, I can take 2 cars off the road. A car, on average, I can only carry 1 to 2 students. 2, if I have a student that doesn't have any other behavioral factors, which most of our students that attend some of these programs do have other complications that keep us from having them on a seat with another student. And a minivan, I've got 3 rows, and most of my minivan runs, I'm carrying 4, sometimes 5 students, depending. So I can take, in some aspects, 3 cars off the road with 1 minivan. So, helps quite a bit. Less staffing, less fuel, less maintenance and repair costs.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Decker? No? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Next, a resolution to approve and authorize execution of carnival agreement. Mr. Matt Barber, Director of Parks and Rec.
All right, how's everyone doing tonight? I think everybody has a copy of our contract, our potential contract in your package there. I want to give a little bit of background on this. So we were approached several months ago by National Events Management Corporation about the prospect of holding a carnival at the old Page site. It was proposed that the carnival will be held over 2 weekends in June, and it would consist of kids rides, large-scale rides, games, and food, which the company would provide for us. This would coincide with the beginning of summer and school getting out. The company would be responsible for all permitting, licensing, traffic management, and staffing. This would include any recommendations from the Sheriff's Office regarding public safety or traffic control. This group has provided carnival service for local events for the Virginia Beach Boardwalk, Suffolk Peanut Festival, Isle of Wight County Fair, and others. What they're proposing is 10% of all ride revenue after expenses be paid to the county, which they estimate could be about $8,000 to $10,000. Obviously, that's weather dependent, attendance dependent, and all that, so it could be more, could be less. If this year's event is successful, we could always negotiate different terms in the future if we feel like we want to bring this back. For us, this has the potential to bring in revenue to offset all the maintenance and grass cutting expenses that we have to do to kind of maintain the old Page site now. So we're always looking for revenue opportunities to kind of fix that up. Regardless of the direct revenue provided, an event like this to the county that has no tax dollars directly spent, it's also for the community to enjoy, but it also has a local economic impact that goes along with it. So it could be a great benefit to the county. It's kind of mentioned at various town halls, many feel there's a lack of activity for teenagers and younger adults to participate in. And so we're always looking to get creative and trying different options for these demographics, and we feel like this event could be a pretty good success. The agreement, I believe, is in front of you, and it's been run by the county attorney, and so it's up for your consideration. Any questions or comments?
Who does the cleanup after they leave?
They do, and
They do.
that's in there, yes. And
Is it in there?
part of it is they want to return the grounds fully back to like it is. So if it's rainy or whatever and they dig up any dirt and all that, they've got to go back and maintain, seed it, and everything over it. So, yep.
So they operate all the rides as well as all the food stands?
Correct.
So all the profits from that comes to that company, and then we get whatever they say they're going to, because if the meals are,
Yeah.
taxed, a food tax, do we get the food tax off the meals?
Correct. And that's part of the licensing and permits. They'll make sure all the permits are filed correctly. We have to have amusement permits for all individual rides. All the food vendors have to have registered so we get the meals taxed appropriately and all that. But we wouldn't get any direct revenue from the sale of the meals, just from the rides. And again, when the company approached us several months ago, they were kind of feeling like this is a new location for them to go to. They looked at us for the Middle Peninsula, but because they felt like it's sort of an unknown, they felt like they were taking on a bulk of the, the risk in this event. So, going forward, I said, in future years, if we feel like this is successful, we could always up the terms or, negotiate for some different revenue sources and all that, if we decide we want to bring it back.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions for Mr. Barber and one for Mr. Wilmot. Thank you for your presentation. Have you received any feedback or information from these other festivals? I know the Suffolk Peanut Festival is quite large. What's their input on their experience with this particular company?
Yeah, I have, colleagues in other localities I reach out to about them. One particular in Virginia Beach that I used to work there with her. She oversees the events now. We've gotten good feedback. Again, they're somewhat of a local contractor. They're based out of Chesapeake, even though they do carnivals up and down the East Coast. They're not really a fly-by-night type company, but everything we've heard is they're professional and they know what they're doing. They kind of come in, bring their whole setup, and they go and they move on to the next place. So we haven't really heard much negative feedback from everybody.
And do you feel confident we have sufficient parking for an event like
So that is a concern slightly, I would say, out of all the things. Part of this is I want to see if we went this direction and got it passed and we figure this is what we want to go with. But we feel like right now we're okay, but because we extend the dates out, it's 2 weekends, and we have potential to add Thursday nights in too. It's not like you're cramming it all into one weekend. So we were thinking that might bring the attendance out a little bit, and we explored with the potential, if we want to add a satellite lot and all that. We aren't there yet if we feel like we want to do that. Again, part of this process is they're going to reach out to the sheriff's office and get any traffic management plans and all that, and we can kind of figure out what direction we want to go. But I definitely think there's a potential there for some sort of satellite parking, but I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. Yeah.
Thank you. And a question for Mr. Wilmot, and I expect a particular answer from you, but with any large operation like this, particularly a operation with rides, and, I'm assuming you'll review the contract thoroughly and ensure that they are assuming this organization will assume the liability and hold our county harmless for any harm that occurs on the property.
Yes, I have reviewed it. Yes, it comports with legal requirements. Yes, although the initial iteration of the contract required the county to indemnify them if anything happened. That was an immediate non-starter, and so I sent it back to Matt and said, no, never going to happen. So now they have to indemnify us. So it's good. I still have some reticence. I'm still not totally comfortable, but on balance, it's fine for the county legally. I think it's probably a good thing.
You mentioned traffic control. Are they paying for the extra?
Correct. Any expenses that come in, if they're paying for extra deputies or anything that the sheriff determines, they're paying for that.
Will there be the possibility of a plan just in case they need satellite parking, maybe at the Page School?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to get at, is depending on if we feel like this is the direction we want to go. We didn't want to get too deep into that stuff because there's a lot of asking and all that, but I definitely think there is the potential there, whether it's Page or TC Walker, somewhere close, so yeah. And I know I got to ask the school system about that, but yeah, one step at a time.
Yes, sir. Mr. Nicosia.
So, Ms. Tewick, you've been around a long time, right? So that's what you tell me all the time. Is this a step up from what used to be the county fair?
I think it's a different kind of event, and I think there's a lot of people who would like to see a county fair again, but that served its time and purpose, and until society changes again, we're not going to have a county fair where people are having competitions for the produce they grow and all those things. We're just not that kind of a farm community. But at the same time, I think people have always enjoyed carnivals. This came out of, it was unexpected.
Yep.
But I think it'll be very interesting if the board approves to see this, because even though we are close to Busch Gardens and things, there's a lot of people who still can't afford to go there, or their children are maybe too young. And so, coming out with the kid ride on a merry-go-round, things like that, we just don't have that kind of opportunity here. So I think it's a good thing too, to try it.
Okay, any other further discussion? Yes, sir.
Mr. Barber, Mr. Wilmot, where in the contract does it say anything about them cleaning up?
So I got to look exactly where. But I actually, that specifically made sure that was in there because we maintain the grounds. My big concern was I want the grounds returned like they were when you got there. I got to find exactly where it is in the contract, but. It's a long contract, so I don't know the exact wording.
This is the entire contract is in?
Correct, yes, that's everything in it. I think it's 7 or 8 pages.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and again, that, because we maintain the grounds, that was a big concern for me. It's like, I don't want it to show up and just be torn up after we use it, so.
Okay, any further
Anything else?
questions? So we have the resolution
Yeah.
on page 3, your packet.
Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? Ms. Steele?
Dr. Orth?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Nicosia?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda will be the department's budget review. Is that Ms. Steele and Ms. Callaway?
Yes, I think items C and D sort of blend together, and we'll start with Ms. Callaway talking about the departmental budgets. But for those who, I kind of thought I should introduce it because in the last board meeting, Tuesday night, at the end of the meeting, there was discussion where we talked about having each of the department heads come to this meeting and to present on their budgets and kind of what they do and how they could potentially handle a decrease. And so in the transition of time, we felt like it would be, and this was discussed with board members kind of here and there of what people thought would work best, rather than having all of the different people come in here tonight, where we would start with a summary and let the board decide if there's any particular ones that you would like to see. And we're here to provide all the information that you all want, and we kind of hear, sometimes we hear we want very specific details about some things, and other things it's more about big topics. So if we're not answering what your needs are, or you would like more information, please let us know. We want this to be a very successful work session for you all. So with that, I'll turn over the first part to Ms. Callaway.
Thank you. So as Ms. Steele explained, we have some very specific details in here. I'm going to start with a couple of slides on just some overview of what we've been looking at since the last board meeting, where there was some discussion about cutting 3%, that type of thing. So I'll go over some of the those key types of things, and then first, and then I guess we'll be looking for your guidance as to whether you'd like to just look at the individual details on your own, or whether you'd like for us to review them, the ones that we have so far. So first, key considerations. We wanted to provide context with when you're looking at the budget. Also, we've provided, I should have mentioned, hard copies of the budget book, if that's something that you're interested in. This has been online for several weeks, but this is a hard copy for you. And when you're looking at individual department budgets, we provide every single line item in these workbooks, as well as you'll see in the slides. Sometimes you see personnel costs look like they are fluctuating a lot. I wanted to just clarify that there's no raise or anything like that included in any of the individual departmental budgets. We budget the COLA and any other types of personnel items in contingency in a lump sum. And then those are allocated as they're determined to be, or as they're approved. So when you see fluctuations, sometimes it may be, for instance, a building inspector that we had coming in mid-year this year, and next year's salary for 26 may be a little bit higher than 25, but that's because of something that happened within this fiscal year, not any sort of raise that happened in the middle of the year or in 26 that we've put there. Also, you'll notice there's some changes in VRS. VRS changed their allocation for hybrid employees, and as our hybrid employees are anybody hired on January 1st of 2014 or after, that cost has become more expensive for the county. We're picking up more of the hybrid retirement. So as our workforce changes to be more of those people that are hired 2014 or more recent, that cost is increasing. You'll also notice there are some huge fluctuations in some of the personnel lines. Some of that's due to health insurance. If somebody, and I don't mind calling myself out, I went on county health insurance in the middle of this year because I had a qualifying event. That is a huge expense, and the most expensive health insurance plan, if you do a health insurance for a family, is close to $30,000 per employee. So that can impact the budget quite a bit and make it look a little funny in those personnel lines. So I also wanted to mention that the proposed budget, obviously, we reviewed that back in January. We made cuts as we reviewed the departmental budgets then. So the 26 budget already reflects those amounts that may be lower than 2025 amounts. And lastly, some departments may look like they have cut a whole bunch out of their budget. Facilities is one that's a good example, or information technology. A lot of that is due to FMRR, our Facility Maintenance, Repair, and Replacement Plan. And what we do, similar to a cost of living increase, is budget that in contingency as well as a lump sum. And then we, up to the day of the budget and in the middle of the year, are reallocating based on the most important and most vital projects, so that money gets doled out to the budget, to the individual departments throughout the year. So that may look like a big cut, but it's probably, you want to check that FMRR line. So first wanted to touch on these next several slides, what is excluded. So we're going to start out with what's included, and then we'll talk about what is there, what's excluded, and then we'll talk about what actually is there. We have not evaluated the grant-funded departments. As you know, we created a new grant fund this year, and that grant fund is funded with about $2 million in federal, state, and other types of grants, and about $400,000 of county money. So we have not, if you would like us to, we have not yet been able to go through those departments.
And if I can, just to clarify, we have evaluated when we put the budget together.
Oh, immediately.
What Ms. Calloway means is we haven't cut that since the proposal. But some of these were cut, as she said, earlier on, months ago.
They were not included in this portion of the exercise that we have done. So we also have not done a second look at the library, but we wanted to stress that any cuts there will impact state funding, because state funding is based on that total library budget. We have not reviewed for a second time constitutional or state offices or the courts. Civic and external contributions have not been reviewed for any sort of cuts in this go-round. And then the county departments that we have not yet had a chance to review, it's not necessarily that we didn't plan on it at all, just we haven't gotten there, are building inspections, emergency management, planning and zoning, environmental, and county attorney. So at the last board meeting, the discussion was to cut 3% out of the budget. It appears there may have been multiple ways of interpreting that, that discussion, but 3% of the general fund budget is $2.6 million. So then we narrowed it down, as we talked about in other budget meetings recently. We've taken out all of the non-departmental type of costs, things like the health department, where we pay the state for our health department, the contributions to other funds such as the schools, debt service, things like that. We have not evaluated them as part of a 3% decrease in the budget. So then when we narrow it down to what's 3% of only our county departments, that's about $1,070,000. So then when you take constitutional and state offices out of that departmental section group, that leaves 572,000 would be the 3% of those departments. So you see how you kind of whittle that down when you start saying who is not up for consideration for a major cut like that. So to maintain that level of $1,070,000 out of that smaller number of departments, you would be looking at closer to a 6% overall cut of that group of departments. I just mentioned the 5 departments. We did get through 17 departments in the last 5 days, I think it was. Overall, we were able to identify about $397,000 in cuts out of those 17 departments. And I want to stress these are not proposed cuts. These are just identified based on this exercise. And unfortunately, we do not have $397,000 worth of operating budget in those departments. So this would impact personnel if we were to say, cut as much as you possibly can out of this group of departments. It would mean positions, because as you work through some of these departments, and I'll put my own department there, we do not have that amount of money in operating budgets. So that is the end of kind of the overall. The next jumps into departmental slides. Each department has 2 to 3 slides, and we tried to keep them very consistent. So you'll notice there's kind of a summary slide that talks about what the department does, and then it gets down into the numbers. It's graphs. I did not realize so much of my life would be formatting things, but I wish they had a class at CNU on that, because I've worked very hard to format some of these number graphs, and there's a lot of numbers there. Well, I missed that one. And then we tried to summarize the impact for each department. Is that something you want me to go through department by department? Am I waiting for? I've got a yes and a no. I'm not sure what to do.
Let's start with one.
I mean, I'm frankly surprised we're having this discussion, because at the last meeting, there was only one member, respectfully, Mr. Bazzani, who raised this issue. I thought the consensus from the remaining members is that we were not interested in a 3% cut. It sounds good. It's a great soundbite, but it has real-world consequences. You're talking about a reduction in services, a reduction in staff, major impact on employee morale. People want to work where they're valued and appreciated and fairly compensated. And if what the message that they receive from us is 3% cut, no raise, and 2 of your 7 workers are going to be terminated, we're going to have an employee exodus. And the same people who are pushing for a 3% cut are going to be the same people who show up to a county department and say, why is the line so long? Why am I not getting a call return? Why is this permit not being approved quickly enough? There are real-world consequences, and as I said at the last meeting, we can debate whether we want a tax increase this year, but to go beyond that to a 3% cut, I'm opposed to that, and I think this is a conversation that I don't think the majority of the board is interested in.
When I brought the comment about going through department by department, it was more information for the citizens who have mentioned a number of things about the county, and that they would hopefully understand what these departments do and how valuable they are, and that we are working at maximum efficiency. These are departments, someone might think, why do we have 70 departments? So it might be good to run through what these departments do, so that the citizens who have been asking and raising important and relevant questions, we owe it to them to make sure that they fully understand and appreciate all the things that we do to make sure that the county runs smoothly. And as Mr. Gibson said, cutting things would eventually result in us getting the calls, why are things slow? Why can't I get these things done? So it might be worthwhile to run through some of those things. I don't want to do a lot of work, but again, we have to do due diligence in making sure that we use taxpayers' monies appropriately.
Mr. Chair, if I can, just a comment. I think I probably, like others, have a frustration that we can tell a lot of information, but it doesn't mean that people are going to hear it or that they are willing to believe it. And some of the other localities have academic type classes where you come in and it's made fun, but it's for the citizens, like a citizen academy, to come in and learn more about the department and, about the county operations. And I just bring that up because I think that we haven't put the energy into that, because that's a lot of effort. But at the same time, if there were people in the community that really want to know more, I think that would be the best opportunity. Everything that we have here in these bullets is already in our budget book. The thing that you have in front of you today that is not in the budget book is the potential impact of what a 3% cut would mean. And I completely agree with Mr. Gibson, and as Ms. Calloway said, this is not a recommendation. We would really be shooting ourselves in both feet to let 6 or 7 employees go with the lean staff that we have. And so we're willing to go through all of them, but I'm not sure it's worth it, because so few people are coming to our meetings, so few people are watching our meetings, and when the comments that I hear at the meetings are so falsely misrepresented, maybe this academy idea is a better thing, or if you would like to do it at a later time, separate. Like I said, we can go through everything. We have worked very hard, and Ms. Calloway had, the yeoman's work on this versus me. It was an extremely helpful exercise, even though it was cumbersome and, kind of quick. But it just really proved how lean our departments are. When you're looking at removing, different things that are essential in your operations, the only way that you can get the 3%. So that's my miniature soapbox. And again, if you would like us to go through each one of them or pick a couple, however you would like us to proceed.
So I'll just make a comment, since I'm in the minority. Mr. Gibson identified me as the undergoing, that's fine, and I understand what he's saying. I don't know, many of you have never been in a corporate environment where management says you need to cut your staff by 10%, and then you're faced with not fixing operations, not looking for process improvements. You're asked to reduce your department ETFs by 10%. And I'm not advocating cutting 6 or 7 full-time staff, but it is a process that private industry does every single day. They look at this and say, what can we do when the shareholders require us to cut? They will not have any confidence in us if we keep spending, and our income statements look like they're shrinking over every quarter. So I've been through 5 or 6 of these budget reduction cuts, and it's always myopic to look at just labor. You shouldn't just look at just labor. Look at your processes and see what can be cut in terms of process improvements that could cut costs in that way. But it is difficult, and I understand that. It is difficult to do, but it is something that we should keep in mind as a board. That there are possibilities to look at processes, and this was Mr. Mowry's suggested a Doge department, to look at efficiencies. And that doesn't mean cutting heads. That means looking at what efficiencies can we derive from our operations. And that's not cutting heads. That's just looking at process improvements, which is, unfortunately, when I had to do it, basically I was ordered to cut heads. I said, wait a minute, can I just look at my process? Nope, you got to cut heads. That's kind of a myopic view of cutting expenses. And then any of you have experienced that, experienced the stress of interrupting and impacting families when you have to decide who goes and who stays. It's hard. And I fought for process improvements when I was working, but sometimes it just didn't work. They wanted heads cut, and so that's decisions that many companies do on a quarterly basis, if not a daily basis. So I proposed the 3%. I did, just to see if there was an effort, and I guess you've done some thinking about this. This is information that shows that at least there was some thought behind this. And again, maybe we do this over the next period, not in time for this particular budget, but maybe through the rest of the year, we might be able to look at processes and say how we can improve processes in the county. That's my thought.
Yeah, Mr. Bazzani, very good. And I appreciate, your comments. The difference between business and a county is that we're not here to make a profit. Businesses are there to deal with their shareholders. And again, it's the one reason why a lot of businesses went overseas, because their shareholders said, we want our shareholders to make a profit, so where do we go? Overseas. Well, guess what? Things are changing. But it is not our job, to have a system where we want to make profit. That's not our job. Our job is to balance a budget, which we are required every year to have a balanced budget. And granted, we've done, there have been recessions in the recent past where state governments have had to cut and had to make some choices. For example, the time the schools had to go to a 4-day school week in order to balance their budget. That was a tough one. And then the first year that I came on, we had to figure out how to maybe give them some money back to get back to a 5-day week. So, that's just my comment. So we're not here to generate a profit. And maybe the issue of the windfall that you mentioned, we did talk about and I wouldn't say how we use it, but I think it should be part of our discussion, what we do with that money that comes in between January and June from our tax, whatever happens.
That's coming up on a future slide.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see a need to go through this department by department. I would like to see this added to our presentation paperwork like it always is, so people can see it. I have some thoughts on what to do with any windfall, whatever that number may or may not be, depending on what this board decides. Because on top of raises, again, we have this conversation of we're falling behind as far as compensation goes in the region for our positions. And, I've been cheating and looking ahead into this, but yeah, there's plenty of places that we have to spend this money. If you call it a windfall or, whatever you want to call it, right sizing for the locality, there are things there that this money can be used and used properly for.
Whatever the board wants, and then they're comfortable with, Mr. Chriscoe has a proposal that we not go through all these, and I'm fine with that.
I mean, they're here. They're here to look at, gentlemen, and I think our time would be better served if we have questions about it, that we can send those questions to staff and they can get those for us. But I think our time would be better used discussing what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I agree with you, with the exception that I think it's important when the citizens say that there needs to be a 3% cut or any percentage cut with services or anything else for the different departments. Even if we went over one or two of the departments tonight and see what Ms. Calloway and her staff did to figure this out, so the citizens can see what they were looking at and what would happen to the departments if there were a 3% or 4%, whatever percentage cut. I think that's where it's important, is so everybody can see it. And I understand that everybody will see this presentation that's sitting here, but I think they won't have the ability to see everything as in depth as if it's presented.
Would you like me to look at fiscal services? I could present finance.
Let's do yours.
If you wanted to look at that.
Department?
I've got a couple of ideas. And I did want to just mention that I appreciate, I think, the questions. I have citizens that will call me with questions, and I'm always wide open to that, and but this has definitely tested me, as you can tell in my voice in the last several days. But it's been very eye-opening that we are very lean. Let's flip to fiscal services. These are listed out alphabetically. So fiscal services is part of my purview. We're responsible for providing the budget accounting, payroll, et cetera, any financial type of balancing, reconciliation, et cetera, for Gloucester County. We also provide accounts payable services to the schools. So I have a full-time staff member in finance that pays bills for utilities and the school system. So there's a total of 5 employees. Together we do things like the annual budget, cost allocation plan. The audit is a huge piece for us in the fall. And as I mentioned, the bills and payroll for all.
Just because there's been comments made about an objective audit, she means working with the audit company that we do bring in who does objective auditing.
Correct. We are required by law to hire an external auditor that is procured every 5 years. And payroll, we have a payroll person that runs the payroll for all county and school systems. And grants are also a huge function of finance. So when we looked at our department, 3% means $25,000 approximately. And so looking at the line items that we have available to cut out of finance, I add every single dollar each year of exactly what we need for, I know the exact trainings we plan to attend, the exact licensures, memberships. So we started with office supplies. We said if we need to, we'll buy what we need, bring it from home. And then dues and memberships, we cut everything that is not attached to some sort of a license. And training, we also cut everything that is not attached to a license, which is very difficult when you're the only CPA in the office and you're having to make the decision of whether you're going to maintain that licensure or pay yourself. That was a very big realization there. And then the lines above, printing and maintenance service contract, both are functionality of printing checks. So we didn't want to cut those because our vendors wouldn't be very happy. And professional services is dollar by dollar, our annual audit that we pay to an external firm, our cost allocation plan, and our required actuarial services. So then that only left personnel. And that is how we got to that 25,000.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So just curious, the actuarial service, is that a state requirement that we have actuarial overview of our budget?
It's not an actuarial overview. They provide figures that are incorporated into our annual budget. So yeah, our annual audit actually, to provide the value of what our pension liability is. So I believe it is a state. I don't know the specific numbers.
When does the audit start, and does this involve every one of your staff? Because I know they bring people in.
It's already started, to answer that question.
But
Yes.
just general questions on.
Yeah, thank you.
Because we know we see that audit every year. The gentleman or person comes in and tells us all the stuff that they do in the audit. But again, because it's so important, I think people need to know that has to be done every year. It's required, and how much of your staff time it takes to provide these people with it. Because we do hear from them when they make their presentation how important it is for you to be able to provide them with that information. And you get complimented all the time about the way you work with them, and I think that's really important in this process.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So the audits, we've already, we had an email from the auditors a couple of weeks ago to schedule. We have 2 different times that they come on site with us. So we start in May is the first time, and there's not a lot of preparation that happens then. They come and they start to look at individual check copies. It's more of pulling information. And then we have a period of time after June 30th where we are reconciling, because there's some things that July and August have to go back into the previous year, and then they come back and look at all of that in September. And so September's our major time frame, and then we spend October and November completing the actual audit. We prepare the financial statements, and then it's presented to you in December. So it runs May to December. And I would say specifically in those September to November months, at least 2 staff members in the office are working at least 60 hours a week, if not more.
Can we look at Parks and Rec,
Sure.
please?
Gonna test my alphabetical. I do numbers. All right, so Parks and Rec, we have 4 full-time employees, and you know a little bit about what Parks and Rec does already. So I'm imagining you wanted to look at the figures, and very conveniently, I have Mr. Barber in the audience as well, and he and I prepared this fairly recently. So we did not need to pull from personnel out of this budget. However, the biggest impacts are obviously staff training, which is a large morale consideration, and grass cutting at Page and older equipment. So we would replace equipment less frequently that runs out basically, or things that get broken may just be unavailable to use. And then we would intend to alter the schedule of grass cutting so that Page would be cut less often, the old Page site. Oh, park operations, do you want to do that one?
I know,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
it might be, since their budget is divided into a couple different divisions.
Yep, okay, so park operations includes 8 full-time employees. I do want to mention both park operations and Parks and Rec are largely supported by work is required employees, which are not a part of that full-time employee count, but obviously vital to the operations of parks. Go back? Yeah.
I think, as I'm looking at this and thinking, some people may not realize the boat landings is another one of the areas that they do, and that is for trash pickup. And unfortunately, I know there was a comment made earlier about the state boat landing that they need to do their repairs on, but we are out there because these are sites that get trashed a lot, unfortunately.
Thank you. Yes, so 7 parks and 13 boat landings, which was again, I mentioned this was a very interesting but emotional exercise for myself, learning some of these things. Park operations, Mr. Barber and I had a conversation about, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, there's a lot more operating budget you have here to cut. Why are you, why wouldn't we pull from that? And so intelligently, he explained what we could instead close a park one day a week, close the parks one day a week, not a recommendation again, and then maintain those parks all the time versus cutting those maintenance expenses and having them open all the time, but you can't repair your potholes, or you can't repair the bridge that breaks, or so they become less and less usable because you're trying to keep them open. So there's no easy answer in this situation, but that is why you see a larger operating budget, but that suggested cut came out of the personnel instead, which would be cost savings from largely those work as required staff members that are tasked with opening and maintaining those 7 parks or other types of things. And again, if you need details, you've got the right man here, but that's the overview.
I just think it's amazing. You can have 8 people, 8 full-time employees
amazing.
and get all of this done. That's a lot.
Yeah, the boat landings, now there are 3 major ones, the Point, Warehouse Landing, and then Deep Point, correct? Those are not our responsibility. I'm talking about the 3 major ones.
We have, DWR has a contract for 4 landings, Tanyard, then Warehouse, Gloucester Point, and Deep Point. So they have to deal with the capital repairs on them, keep them operational, that kind of thing, but we still do trash pickup. And that is part of the arrangement in the document that we've had for many, 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 many years. And the other ones are sort of bird act, end of the road kind of things, or cedar bush, Oliver, one more name for it, has 3 different names. But that was a family donation made years ago that became a public site.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Callaway, or I guess, could you look at, because if you look at all of these, the ones briefing over, skimming over them, mainly it's looks at cuts and non-required training. Could we get an idea on really what each department spends on training? Because I know but still broken out. And what I find interesting with this is these are cuts with personnel and such to get a 3%. And if we were to look at trying to cut it back to the 3%, it would be double these on most of them. So the cuts, if we just stay at parks and park operations, it'd be close to a $42,000 cut in salaries. You can't cut training anymore. Well, you could cut it down to $5,800, but then there would be other cuts you would have to make to get it down that way. So that's where it's important to try to get those numbers. It'd be almost impossible.
I don't disagree with that, but I want to make sure that we get what you want for the training. So the request in there for 26, like for example, for park ops is the $5,805.
Right.
And they have one training, for example, that happens every 3 years for playground certification.
But the other ones, if you look at all of them down the line, they're all cutting out training. If we could get an idea on what the required training is and what are some of the other trainings that each department does.
Okay, and we can do that. I just was going to say the figures are there, but how they are broken down.
Yes.
And most of the departments have a state professional association, and they have an annual meeting. So that's most of them. But yes, we will be glad to get you the list of the different training programs.
With regard to training now, I think you tried to get people to move upward so
Yes.
that become proficient in particular their jobs.
And keep
Now,
up
so-
with all the changes that are
Right.
happening too.
So the question is, the training may not be required, but it's something that you use as a way to keep people here and know that they have an opportunity to move forward by getting appropriate certification. They may not have the certification when they enter a department, but giving them an opportunity to advance and hoping that they will stay with the department and move forward, I think is equally important to what might be considered the required training of people who have certifications to stay up with their certification.
And besides the morale issue, I think that the best management practices and the things that change year to year, going to those conferences, they get to network with other localities. And I don't know if I was the person who coined it, but I think I was. It said we need to Gloucester-size things. I went to so many different conferences, and I would hear Fairfax or Virginia Beach talking about something, and I knew it was way above us, but we would Gloucester-size it. What does it mean for us? And things happen there before they happen here. So it's all of those different things. But when we had so few line items, we really are left with office supplies and training for most. But we'll prepare that list so that you all can see the sort of vast array of what's out there and what's required.
You know, I know that you've been attempting to create an atmosphere that when you hire someone, they know that there is a ladder that they can take. Because once you start training someone, you want to keep those people here.
Right.
Because they become more and more valuable. When you lose a person that's been here and trained, and then they go to another county, you've just lost not just the person, but all the money that went into
Invested
training
in
that
them.
person.
That's correct.
And, you know, that's what we want to avoid, and I think that's where the salary compensation comes into play. When you start training people, for example, in utilities, in talking with utilities, you can go across the river and just work for water or sewer. Here we have water and sewer together. And we have to know that those jobs over there pay much more and they have less responsibility than what we have in our utilities. I know we've heard from Mr. Maury and Mr. Hogg about the people and needing more people, but we know that trying to get good, competent people in utilities is really hard, and keeping them once they get trained.
So, you know, I was flipping through each of the pages, and if you look at the largest majority of the cost is employees, right? With their salary and their benefits and all that. My concern is, you know, we're talking about a 4%, whatever that amount might be, 4% increase in compensation. The state is going to fund some of that, as I understand it, but it's going to be a recurring cost every year. So next year, are we going to propose COLA increases, which will mean every year thereafter there's going to be tax increases to take care of? That's the worry I have, is that every year it's going to be compensation increases that we'll have to raise taxes for, as opposed to anything else. We're not profit, we're a nonprofit, but we can cut costs, right? But that's my concern, is that, and I'm fine with the budget that we have here. It is compensation related, but the average compensation in corporate America is about 2.1%, right? We're doing 4% in the county. So we'll get employees at least ahead, and inflation right now is 2.8%. So we're giving them a little cushion there in compensation. But my concern is it's going to be a recurring cost every year, because you're going to come back to us well, I won't be here next year, but you're going to come back and you're going to say, well, I want to do another COLA increase. Well, that means, because our budget is so lean, it's going to mean a tax increase again, every single year, right?
If I can, Mr. Chair. So yes. I looked at the chart today and I left it on my desk of all the percentages of COLAs that were tracked for a good 15 or so years. And I want to do that again and finish it up because it was stopped. They're generally, in almost every realm, is some sort of a cost of living adjustment. Some places that don't do those have some sort of general raise or have a step program. Very few people, unless there is no inflation, whether it's government or private sector, do not give some sort of a leveling up. And that doesn't mean that it's a tax increase every year, because if you look at how few tax increases that we've had compared to the COLAs that have been given, it doesn't have to mean that. We're at a point where there are other things kind of happening at the same time, and we're getting further behind because we are not growing. And I know a lot of people don't want to see growth, but when the same group of people are wanting to pay the same amount of taxes, but yet seed's gone up, fertilizer's gone up, every piece of lumber, everything that we pay for has gone up, and the salaries, people want to be compensated. So unless the county grows, you have to raise taxes. And it's finding that balance of what are we willing to pay as a bedroom community versus how many more. One person said in a letter tonight how they want to see more business on Route 17. I guarantee you I could pack this courthouse with people who don't want to see any more development on 17. So the board has this difficult balancing act of how do you grow, how do you not grow? But right now we're really limited in our revenue sources. They've been, and as you know, our real estate revenue total is going down, not up. So we have to raise taxes just to stay even because of the deductions we're currently having.
So, and I appreciate your comment about, citizens don't want businesses growing along 17. I always use Pocosin as an example. Pocosin's tax rate is twice ours, and they are resident rich, business poor. There's no business over there absorbing the tax base. So it's critically important that we develop Route 17, bring more businesses in this county to alleviate the burden on real estate property owners. It's imperative that we didn't. Dr. Orth and I, we've always said we wanted to grow businesses in this county. We're going to see an influx of folks here when that toll goes off, because we were the highest growing county in the state of Virginia from 1975 to 1992 when they reinstalled the tolls. We're going to see that growth come, and it's going to mean more fire and rescue, it's going to mean more schools, it's going to mean everything. But if we don't absorb that through bringing, some incentives to bring businesses in here, it's going to be for naught. Unless we want to adjust our comprehensive plan to say, we don't want this growth.
And then that just means
And
those
that makes it more
taxes have to
difficult
go
for everybody.
If you'd like, I'll move on into the next section because we were talking about
Let me just mention
payroll.
about businesses. I know this is a tough time for businesses to decide where to go. I know Fox Mill Run, they're always looking to figure out how to get other businesses, but they're not going to put a business in there unless they know it's successful. Now, the one that surprised everyone was Chick-fil-A. They didn't think Chick-fil-A was going to do much, and it's the most. Yeah, and then Aldi's. Look at what Aldi's is doing. So we would like to, and I think we look to getting businesses here. But the big box store that you always would like to come, Costco, I just don't think that would come to Gloucester.
When the toll opens up, you'll see how many rooftops.
Yeah.
We're a long way from the rooftops.
Yeah.
We'll see how fast we grow.
But I think we, as you indicated, with the time that we've been on the board, we've always been encouraging and being a business-friendly, or create a business-friendly environment. That means both small and big businesses alike.
Yes, sir. Mr. Nicosia.
Well, it's on my mind. I know Ms. Steele wants to move away from this, but I do have a very important question. Just something that just keeps getting brought up to me, is, and maybe there's not anybody in the building that can answer this question, but Ms. Calloway might. Say you don't give pay raises, but next year, guess what's going to go up? Health insurance. So at some point, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's this year, but at some point, the cost of health care for the county and the staff member is going to be lopsided. So at some point, you have to say, your health insurance is going to cost you $500 a month, but we're not going to give you a pay raise this year. A lot of people might swallow that, but if it continues to do it, that's where you're going to end up with a problem.
We just lost another employee recently to York County. We are their we're their best grounds for hiring. So if we don't keep up with those healthcare costs at minimum and keep up with that inflation, I think we will lose more. And as we just said, that the toll coming off works both ways, because maybe people didn't want to have to come home and pay it, but now they won't have to. So working across the river may not be as uninviting.
Yes, sir.
One last comment, and I'll stop. One of the speakers said this evening that, for those county employees who are making over $100,000 a year, why not cut off pay raises for those who make over, let's say, $90,000 to $100,000 a year, and take that money and give it to the people who you're losing because of pay? They're being stolen by other counties. Someone who makes $100,000 a year can probably live without a $4,000 pay raise, right? And you can use that money to pay the people who deserve it most, the people that operate this county, the operations part of this county. So, do we want to consider that as a board? Do we want to say, excuse me, but anyone making over $100,000 or $90,000 a year, take that money and give it to those people who are down below that and subsidize them, pay them, so they stay here, if you're going to do pay raises this year?
And Mr. Bazzani, they probably would go somewhere else that's going to give them a raise.
From salaries that are over $100,000 a year, $4,000 can go a long way to someone else's pay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate Mr. Bazzani raising this issue of considering a 3% cut. I think we've had a good civil debate. I think in some circumstances, this is exactly what a government should do. I worked for the federal government for many years, and I saw firsthand the waste and the bloat and the ineffective employees who were not doing what they were supposed to do. And in those situations, there needed to be some cuts. And so I see the benefit. At the local level, the reason why I don't think it's appropriate at the local level is we have a very, very lean budget, which leads me to my second point is this has been, as it is every year, one of the most transparent processes for our community. We must be on our 10th meeting, perhaps, discussing this budget. We've had presentation after presentation. All of this information is before the public. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that we're having a civil debate, but I think what detracts from our debate is when we are faced, and I know politics is a rough and tumble business, and we are under the scrutiny of our constituents, but what does not elevate the debate is when we are faced with comments from the public of baseless accusations of lies, of a baseless suggestion that we should be referred to a criminal grand jury, which frankly is defamatory. So I think that this is a two-way street, and I would appreciate it if those who wish to contribute to the public debate would do so as respectfully as we are engaging in this debate right now.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
can comment about the higher salary. I think it's a good, legitimate question that is raised by public members, first of all, and it has been raised by board members in the past. As a long-tenured employee, I do remember it happened one time, maybe 30-plus years ago. It was the top 5 employees, I think it was, or something, did not receive a raise. It did not go over well. And one of the things that, I mean, I think you all have to make these tough decisions, so it's going to be whatever you all decide. But in your pros and cons to that, we are a small county operation compared to many others. Our department heads wear many hats, and they are the ones that are working the 60 hours a week, the whatever. They're on call all the time. They are working the weekends. I mean, they're just doing anything and everything they can to keep their departments operational. And it seems like a slap in the face to say, oh, well, you're making so much money, when they also are not living in a bubble. They know, just like I know, how much my peers make across the river. And it's a lot more over there. And I think if some people are just reaching that breaking point where we may break them, and that's going to be the most skilled, the most knowledgeable, probably the most vested employees that we would have leave us because of wanting to separate them. I noticed that York County is continuing a policy that they chose to do. I think it's a little bit smaller than usual. The way that they have balanced things is they do a split raise, and they do a cost of living increase, and they do a flat amount. So this year, York County is proposing a 4% COLA. We only have a 3%, not 4%. 4% COLA and a $500 flat fee. Because the $500, if you said a 5% raise, that would be a lot more to those people up there. So and this was something that Neil Morgan, I think, put into effect when he came over. And I've mentioned it before, it is something that we could consider because maybe that does provide a little bit of balance. But we have to be careful of what's the payoff we get for something like that. And also knowing that our department heads do not get step increases the way that the other lower employees get. So everybody who's at a management level or not does not get, it's very small, the step increase we get. So it's something for you all to think about and decide whether you want to pursue. And again, I'm not trying to push us, but that does go into the next topic because I think that, I mean, the reality is a lot of where you do have maybe some area that you want to look at and what are the big costing items, they are personnel related.
And one thing, I know we'll hear a lot from Ms. Steele because she's responsible for all the county employees. We're here once every couple of weeks and we do work and try to do our best, but you're with these people day in, day out, and you hear that, and you're the voice to speak to their needs and to us and tell us about the morale issues and all that. So some people may say something different, but we need to hear because you're in this day in, day out. We aren't. Let me get,
Okay.
yeah, well, I think that's an issue that we can discuss as we move through the whole budget process to get to that point, because you have a proposed budget with a 4.3 cent tax increase. It's advertised much higher, but you've recommended a 4.3 cent tax increase. And the question is it going to be 4.3 or is it going to be something less? And I think, isn't that our job right now, is to figure out, is it going to be 4.3 or something else? And if it's something else, what are we going to do?
And I don't want to forget, and it's in the slide too, the 3.6 cent request from the schools. I'm going to follow up with some of these personnel kind of items, and we're prepared, whether it's tonight or whether it's the next meeting, to get into the Excel chart to let you all play with these things. So depending upon what you have questions tonight, again, we may get there, we may not, but if there are ideas like changing the salary structure in any way, shape, or form, that would be a good thing to let us know, and then we can bring it back to you.
So I'm going to ask my fellow board members how to address the topic I just discussed with respect to cutoff limits on salaries and who gets a salary increase and who doesn't. Would you guys be interested in seeing who makes over, the number of people who make over $100,000 a year, and then see what that 3% would be, or whatever it might be? Would you like to break that down? I'm not demanding, I'm just asking. Would you like to see that, just to show the public how much management is being paid versus the operational staff in this county?
Yes, Mr. Hutson?
I don't have an issue with coming back. I don't think any names ought to be seen, but I think it could be figured out. But I don't think it's a good idea, because you're going to end up losing employees that are the trained employees. But if we want to have an option of looking at it to see what it is, good. But, you know, it's, I think that's not a good way to go.
The juice isn't worth the squeeze.
It's a good analogy, sir.
I like that.
All right, Mr. Chair, should I move on?
Yes.
Okay, so the first large increase or cause for increase for the budget is looking at the cost of living. The current budget as proposed includes $837,000 and change for that 3%, and that's including DSS. We're not talking about utilities here. Whatever gets decided will be applied there. One of the things that was mentioned was potentially pushing that back until January. And so you would think naturally, well, we'll cut the amount in half. The problem is with the state revenue and what we can and can't do. So the net savings, if we push back to January, would be $278,000, $232,000. We don't know the exact amount that will come from the state on DSS, so it's around that. Another thing that Maria brought forward today that we worked on is looking at what the comp board, they give you the name of the person and how much they have to get and all these things. And so it's really interesting, because some of these people and what the amount they have to earn, what you have to provide in order for them to get that, we could not wait until January. So we would lose the state money unless we only push back to August. We could only do it for 1 month, and we would save $70,000. And again, that may go with your expression, Mr. Chriscoe. I think that was a good one.
This isn't a you thing. This is the state that's sitting on billions and billions of dollars of cash, and they will not release it and send it back to the localities where these people are fighting how to give raises. We're fighting on how much money we got to pay the state in taxes. They don't give the schools enough money. They don't hold up their fair share. And it goes, and that's what my facial expression was for, is the states, well, they claim they're sitting on these billions of dollars of cash, but they never want to do anything with it.
And I was referring to, if it's worth the squeeze, to hold it back for a month for $70,000 The other thing is the elected officials would have to have their salaries July 1. So that's like a.
I just want to look at the orange, I didn't want to squeeze it.
Ms. Chriscoe,
I wish you could've
the
told
one
us
issue,
that.
the one that really is the one that hurts us most in all localities was the governor's decree about providing veterans with real estate relief and property tax. And that came without any, benefits to us.
They said, hey, this is a great idea. The localities can decide if they want to do it or not. Instead of the state just going, hey, we're going to do this, and the state giving us the money. Because us as a board could have said, no, we're not going to do it. But, I mean, who looks like the schmo in that picture? It's us, not the governor or the General Assembly who said, hey, we think this is a great idea. But, I mean, it's just another unfunded mandate is what they did when they passed that on to the locality to decide whether or not they wanted to do it.
When Mr. Bazzani and I were in Chesapeake last week for the meeting, we were with the York County people, and their loss is $4 million.
And as Ms. Calloway said, our
locality.
loss is 2 cents on the tax dollar right now, and it's changing daily, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, go ahead, thanks. The next thing that we talked about that we talked about early on individually, which is not in the budget, is this proposed 1.5% state bonus, and there's also a different measure for teachers. And things kind of got changed around, whether it was June, whether it was July. So when I met with the board in our early 2-on-2 meetings, I discussed that it was something we could talk about after the budget was adopted if you wanted to, and that we thought we had enough vacancy savings in FY25 to pay for it. Even though the regulation came out and it says July 1, it's the salaries as of June 30th, and so one option we think, and we can verify, would still be, if the board wanted to offer it, would be to put it in 25. Another would be to add it to the budget, and the net cost is the $277,149. It is not in the budget right now, and so that's the option 3, is just don't worry about it, and other people probably aren't going to do it, and many are, but it would be an addition and kind of going the wrong way with the budget, but I know it would be absolutely appreciated by employees. The compensation study, the implementation of it, and this is a big unknown, so right around $700,000 is what we put in the budget. Originally, we were going to have almost a little bit more than double of that, but we were trying to balance the budget, so we got it down to 2.3%. And this could be looked at 2 different ways, with kind of being almost half of that. We could do more implementation and do it at mid-year at January, or it could mean do half if we were going to cut it, to do half of it and still do it in July. But so maybe it's taking it to a quarter instead of a half.
Mr. Chriscoe.
And I was just going to say, and delaying it completely too, or to another time.
Well, that's what I was looking at earlier when I was reading ahead. With the money that comes from a tax increase, I think it would be foolish of us, if there's going to be that revenue, not to, if this tax increase goes through at the rate that it's looking like it's going to go through, I would think that 1.488 should be able to be covered with that excess revenue. And then with a reassessment the next year, we can probably correct it. I think it would behoove us to try to get more than the $700,000 done in this coming year. And I know there's a number in there where it breaks even, so we don't have to, it doesn't put us in a hole for the following year.
Right.
If we can right-size that to make sure we're going to be in a good spot. And then maybe, if we're going to do that, because I'm assuming this will affect quite a number of people that work in the locality as well, that then we could maybe look at a 2% COLA with more implementation of this. To make it, and that's sort of getting back to your COLA plus a...
Right. I sure wish we knew what the numbers were going to be. When we did the last change, which was done in FY19, I looked it up earlier today, and so in FY19 there was an internal adjustment, and the average was an 8% change. So some people might have gotten 13% and some people might have gotten 2% or whatever, but the average was 8%. Personally, I hope it's not that high. I'm hoping they're going to find that we're better in line, but we just don't know. So that's another, and if you go ahead and flip, then you will see, well, one more, then we'll get back to sort of the all three together. The health insurance impact, I did take another look at our rates and kind of like estimating if somebody got a 3% cost of living adjustment, we don't know what their tax situation would be. But if a person makes $40,000 a year, then they're going to get $100 if they get the 3% COLA, then it would be about $100 a month less taxes. So if you look at our highest monthly rate is $82. So it would eat up the vast majority of a raise for someone making $40,000. They would not go into the hole, but they wouldn't feel like they got a 3% raise. And I'm still interested in trying to help people see the value of the high deductible plans that we've talked about, that others have suggested of reorganizing that system that might, it's not going to cost any more to the county, but just the way we would organize it, people might be front-loaded on the county portion, so they'd be willing to make the jump over to an HSA and get a lower costing program. So again, summary there, everybody who works for us would not go in the hole with if they get a 3% COLA, with the increase that we're facing for health insurance rates, but they would be almost flat if you're at the high end and on the low end on salaries, okay? So this is just the summary of these potential 3 items, and for you all to be thinking about and what you might want to do. I think everybody likes to know as soon as they can what their raise is going to be, especially if they are trying to decide whether to stay, go, or they just want to plan, or however. But at the same time, the board does have the option of adopting a budget for allocating the percentages and all those things at a different point. If you took a contingency amount and kept it in contingency until that study is complete, then you could do, like maybe Mr. Chriscoe said, and go lower on the COLA, but go higher on the implementation. So I think it would just depend on where you want to be with these things.
And that middle line, just so everyone is clear, is for compensation study implementation, and not just for the study, just so everyone's aware.
We're all going to become consultants if that becomes the fee for that.
Sign me up.
Okay. Go ahead. Switching gears to looking how to potentially handle the budget differently on the revenue side versus the expense side. And this is what we were talking about with the quote-unquote windfall. And it was really funny. I don't think we're comfortable with that word at all. And we looked up synonyms, and manna from heaven is a synonym. So there were quite a few.
Manna from heaven.
Manna from heaven. If we want to use the manna from heaven to do, there were some really funny and some very almost offensive. And I think even windfall for us makes it sound, because if you're making an investment in your capital areas that need to be improved, then it's not a windfall of waste, which is, I think, what people compare it to. But if we have a 4.3 cent tax increase, we're expecting that we're going to generate the 2.4 million. And as you all know, that the billing is on a calendar year. We looked at what has been collected in June and thinking about what would we potentially have this June. If you go with a 4.3 cent tax increase, you would potentially have $1,055,000 in this fiscal year attributed to, because it could still be collected all the way up until August 15th and backed into the current year. So if you do nothing with that, it grows your fund balance. Where does our fund balance go? To capital, for the most part. That's where it should go. you have the, go ahead and flip it if you will, you have the ability to earmark that for capital, but some of the other things, and we do have capital projects we're behind on, some of the other things that were mentioned Tuesday night was, this is a one-time extra funds that are there would be to subsidize the utilities fund. It would by doing this and estimating it, it's a risk because you could end up being short in one year or the other. But you're looking at, you could lower the tax increase, and again, not looking at anything but the 4.3 to 2.4. And so no windfall, no capital extra, no utility subsidization, but a lower tax rate with a risk that, God help us, the money better come in like we think it's going to. If you keep the tax increase, whatever it ends up being, the amount, and you have additional funds that come in under this fiscal year, my suggestion, our suggestion is that you would not spend any of that until the audit is complete. So you may have it earmarked, but then you would, and it's a part of the budget, so we don't have to go back and do another public hearing because of increasing the budget, but that you would make sure, because we say that $1,055,000, but what happens if we don't get it, you know?
It's like the utilities and the reserve.
Right.
I had to smile at Katie because she.
Okay, and then the other thing that we have not talked about up to this point is the school board's request. So we've spent a lot of time in getting further details on our request and what you all might want to do. And, but there's additional requests that are out there that would take the tax increase higher. And these 6 bullets are the breakdown that the superintendent provided for and that the school board adopted for the use of the additional funds that would be beyond a level budget. The good news is superintendent and I met, as we do monthly and at least, and met last Friday, and the news that they're getting is we should be expecting the General Assembly's approved budget with the extra $229 million that's spread out throughout the state. So the other million plus that is in the budget should be coming. Even with that, they were still requesting the additional $2 million. And as you think about what you want to do next, this would be, you know, and who you might want to hear from. This may be another subject matter that you might want to concentrate with school request. And then the civic organizations, several of them spoke at the public hearing and didn't want to neglect them from the comments that they were made, and just making sure that the board is comfortable with the recommended budget, which is $41,877 short of what was requested. The highlighted yellow was a change made to the Gloucester Matthews Humane Society. Based on the other line items that we gave, they reduced their request to the 2023 amount, so just back to the 97. And so if you look at the previous slide from before, it would have been more than 41 because it went down a little bit. And I know no one came from Soil and Water Conservation District, but we also did level fund them, which would be reducing by 4,000.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gibson.
While we're on these groups, I did want to address this. I think the requests are quite reasonable overall for these organizations, and I think they all made very persuasive presentations at our last meeting, and the impact that each of these organizations has, has on our community is massive. The care clinic for lower income patients who are in desperate need of health care, the Humane Society, Mr. Camp made a very persuasive presentation about the spay and neutering program, the pet food for indigent owners of pets, the adoptions of pets, and then the Bay Transit is so vital for transportation for people traveling to work, people traveling for healthcare appointments, These are really, really important, vital services. When I'm looking at the numbers, I love the dogs and cats, but I can't see awarding them 17 over 10 to the humans at the care clinic. So I would ask that the board consider a flat $10,000 to each of these groups, the top 3 groups here, based on the important impacts that they have for our community. So, a flat reduction? No, making up the difference of what has been requested. So 10,000, there's a 10,000 deficit to Bay Aging. Humane Society is asking for 17. I would propose a flat 10, and then the care clinic, who I think is the most important of these 3, they are also asking for 10. So my proposal is an adjustment of $10,000 to each of these groups to make up that shortfall.
I agree with that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I agree with Mr. Gibson, except that I think we need to get back to the 2023 funding that we had for the Humane Society when it was at the 97K. I mean, they're asking to get back to where they were 3 years ago. They're not, I mean, they're kind of asking for an increase, but that's where they were 3 years ago. Actually, the top 3, I have no problem funding at their requested levels and figuring out a way to do it, because all 3 of them provide very valuable services to people and animals in the entire county, and I just think it's probably where we need to be.
I'll throw in that I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen with Bay Transit. There's been a number of federal cuts that are coming into transportation, and so I've read about what's happening over there, but I haven't heard the impact yet. But I have a feeling they're going to be taking a cut too. But
Yep.
It sounds like we might have our first thing to put onto the Excel sheet as a change. That we could put that in there for the next meeting and
Just as
or
an
whenever.
aside,
for tonight.
because I volunteer for Bread for Life, the cuts that are going to food banks is very serious, really serious. And the number of people that are coming on Monday, Wednesday for the Bread for Life, and they're not the only ones that give out food. There are a number of organizations, churches that give food on a regular basis, but the number of people that are coming. So as an example, when we go to get food on a Monday, we leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. The Bread for Life doesn't open until 11. There are people standing in line before 8 o'clock to get in line so they can get the right type of food for them. It's unbelievable.
They're not on SNAP or EBT? These people are just left?
They may be, there are no questions asked about people who come there. They try to vet them, but there's not a lot of requirements. But you can see that, again, when people come, they don't get a full week's of meal. They just get things that are there that we get from, because we go to all the different organizations, like we go to Aldi's and Food Line, and we go to Fresh Market. Every day there's a group of people that go to different places, either within the community or across the river, and pick up food that they don't, they can't use anymore, and we bring it back here, and then we distribute that.
Mr. Nicosia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I have no skin in the game, as my daddy would say, for what I'm about to talk about. But I look at these additional requests from the school board, and as I look at this, and I haven't talked to anybody other than you all and the constituents who have filled my telephone and filled my classroom. Do you have 5 minutes? Yes. All right, so the 2 most important things on this list are you just said it, so I'm going to caveat on something you said. They want them lunches for those children.
Yes.
So I did my due diligence as a board member, and last Friday afternoon, I sat outside my classroom and I watched a large number of our student body. And I'm not talking about 2 or 3 kids. I'm talking about a large number of our student body with grocery bags. I stopped one of the kids that was a student of mine. I said, hey, I said, I ain't trying to get in your business. I said, Mr. Tony just wants to know what's in that grocery bag. And Daniel was one of my students, and he said, oh, I'll show you, Mr. Tony. And he put his grocery bag down. He said, that's Friday night's dinner,
Yep.
Saturday's breakfast, Saturday's lunch, Saturday's dinner, and dinner for Sunday. And I said to my student, I said, is that something that you just got because of the holiday weekend? He said, no, sir. He said, I get that every week. And he went on to tell me that of his own admission, I did not prod him. He said, if it wasn't for breakfast and lunch in the morning, I don't know what I'd do. And he's not the only one. So I promised my principal that I would tell you all this. I went to my principal and I said, I need your advice as a board member. And I said, because you're an administrator in this building. I said, you know this is on the list. He said, yes, sir, I do. I said, how do you feel about it? You're the captain of the ship. He said, Tony, he said, I'll tell you the truth. And he said, you can tell him. I'm not in favor of it. He said, here's why I'm not in favor of it. We could go back to the old way. But we go back to the old way, some of these individuals, parents won't fill this stuff out. So these kids, they'll take it home. He said, maybe mom and dad have difficulty. He said, so they don't fill it out. Or maybe they just don't fill it out at all. He said, some of these kids won't eat. He said, it's been a great joy for me as principal of this building to know that every child that steps in this building can get at least 2 meals. And he said, I'll be glad to come and tell them myself. So, that's the hill I'm going to die on, is that we need to find a way to make sure that our school children have something to eat. Secondly, the student device replacement. I told you all a couple weeks ago that is 90%, maybe 85. 85% of the students in any of our buildings have a Chromebook. Everything that they need is on that Chromebook. There are specific classes, I'm sure Dr. Perdue could tell you, that require textbooks. But a lot of our classes, this stuff is on Canvas. So if a kid is sick, they can go right to their Chromebook and they can keep up with what they've got to do in their classes. The problem is that they've had some of these Chromebooks since they were in middle school, and they're not lasting because they're 4 and 5 and 6 years old. So if we don't do anything else if we don't consider anything else on here, I would request that we at least take a look at feeding the school children and making sure that they have the device they need to be successful in the classroom.
The comments that Mr. Nicosia makes about high school students, I think this is pervasive in all the schools down to the elementary school regarding kids needing food on weekends.
So I'm not a school board member, and I'm not talking for the school board, but we have talked about means testing some of these parents who can afford to send food and monies for their food, and help those who cannot afford. We do have families that can afford to send children, their meal ticket with a fund attached, because they can afford to do that. Many families can't. So, I don't know. I can't ask. I don't know what that is. What the split is between those who can't afford and those who cannot afford, and those who can afford paying for their child's lunch and lunch and breakfast in the morning. So, you talk about one thing, just giving free lunches to everyone, but there's also the means testing of all that. And many localities in Virginia have done that already. Some of them have already done the means testing and provided funding for those who cannot afford school lunches. So that's just my thought on it. I'm not speaking for myself or the school board. I'm just saying that perhaps considering means testing some of this funding. The computers, if you recall, that was done by the state. They provided all this money to buy Chromebooks for the schools. We need to probably perhaps look at that device. If the devices are wearing out and they're not working properly, perhaps we need to look at that. But that's something we can discuss, gentlemen, later on if you want. But,
Well, yes, we will. I totally agree with the student device replacement and the food program. There are some that can pay, but I don't know if Mr. Nicosia has seen this, but I've seen kids go to the cafeteria and they think they have money on their lunch account. And they come back and they haven't gotten anything to eat because this is when they were paying. And they come back, they didn't have anything to eat, and they say, well, my parents didn't put any money on my lunch account. And they come back with nothing. That's when I go in my file cabinet and pull out Rice Krispie treats and everything else I can find. Healthy food. Healthy food. Yep. It's sad, but it's there. We see it. It's in Gloucester. It's here.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for the board, would you all like to get into the spreadsheet tonight? Would you like to talk about the schedule and how to go forward? What would you like to do?
Well, we're coming back on Thursday. So we're coming back on Thursday. Too much sometimes is overload.
So we have there were a couple of options that I think that were brought up. You can definitely, we're on schedule as a tentative meeting for Thursday, and Mr. Chriscoe will not be able to be here.
So we need another meeting.
And then, so if you do not want to hold that, Trish gave me the notes that if y'all were feeling crazy, Fridays and Saturdays are available in the courthouse.
I'm not feeling that crazy yet.
Not feeling that crazy
Not
yet?
yet.
Okay, the other is looking at Tuesday, April 29th, you have already. And then if you wanted to, you could change April 30th to a budget work session and add the adoption of the budget and work session and finish adopting the budget at your May 5th meeting, or even could add it to a May 6th meeting.
You can make that work. But we would like you to be
Ms.
here.
Callaway, while we're discussing this, can you pull up the spreadsheet with the proposed changes that were just mentioned and see what that would do?
Yes, you can, sir.
Dr. Ledoux, I've got a question for you or Mr. Hartley, whichever one might know the answer to this. That number that's being contemplated for student device replacements, and I'll wait to finish asking the questions till you get up here. How many?
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir. Okay. How many devices will that replace? Does that replace system-wide, or is that half, a quarter?
No, it's approximately a third, so we would have a device replacement cycle. Some of the Chromebooks that were bought are, approaching 5, and we would begin with some of the older Chromebooks to start replacing, and the cost would be much higher if we were to replace them all at one time.
Can we get that number?
We certainly will provide. I do not have it for you tonight,
I don't need it
but I'll
tonight, but
provide
if you
it
can
to.
provide that, that'd be fantastic.
Dr. Ledoux, is the state, as Ms. Steele said, the state will be providing funding. What was the amount, Ms. Steele?
It's over $1 million additional funding that we hope that will come forward with extra
Okay, so the additional
staff
million,
positions.
$500,000 for Chromebooks, $500,000 for.
That money is specifically for, how they have the SOQ positions?
Oh, okay,
It's
I
to
get it.
add for who they're compensating.
Okay, forget that. All right.
Do they, I know they provide in some different things, do they provide any technical equipment money that you all have accounted for to try to get more? Do they earmark?
In terms of technology or
Yes.
textbooks? So the state does have some money for technology. For instance, this year, we're using that money to replace the teacher laptops. But it's not enough to, for a full replacement cycle, we would need more to start beginning replacing those devices.
But it might be one of the things when you come back is to say what it would be for the entire replacement with including what you would be getting from the state unless that money was earmarked for some other technology.
So,
Anything else?
Doc-
Thank you.
Dr. Vadu, this, just so I'm on the same, where you and I are on the same page, 450,000, that is what you will need to continue what we're already doing division-wide as far as meals is concerned, correct?
That is the estimated cost. Now, I know currently there's a lot of work being done to make sure that we estimate that in a way that's, we can move forward and provide that service. So we're doing a lot of work right now to ensure that we can continue that program. However, I do want to say, just as a reminder, 42% of our students are free and reduced lunch, the rest are not. And so we are looking at all options when it comes to trying to continue that program or look at other options.
so what percentage was that again?
42% according to the state report, are students that are classified as free and reduced lunch or live in poverty.
Do the parents still fill the forms out?
Well, that's one way for students to get that free and reduced lunch. There are a couple of ways to do that. One, the parents can fill those forms out. They're available online, so a child does not have to be embarrassed.
Yes, but are we, in light of the fact that we're giving lunches now, lunch and breakfast to everyone, are they still filling that form out?
That is one advantage of the C. The answer is no, they do not have to fill it anymore because the CEP program applies to everyone.
So the 42% we're not sure of.
Well, it is because it's related to testing. Free and reduced lunch of students that live in poverty are some of the hardest students to reach. So we do keep track of that information in regards to testing and accountability. So we're pretty sure about that number, the 42%.
I know that was right at the same amount when we started looking at the broadband grants because we had to put that in.
Thank you.
Not Thursday, we were gonna, Ms. Steele, will you give us those dates again, please?
You are already on schedule for the 29th.
The 28th, the Monday. The Monday and the Wednesday of next week.
Okay,
Monday, Wednesday,
I don't
next
have
week.
the Monday on there.
We were scheduled for another meeting on Thursday, the 24th, and then a meeting on Monday, the 28th, with budget adoption on April the 30th.
And you won't be here on the 24th.
I will not be here the 24th.
So the 28th, this would be to add the 29th was what she was implying, not, the 28th is already, and it's just dependent upon how many more nights you think you might need to.
I think the budget's going to be passed the way we discussed. I don't think there are going to be changes to it from what I'm reading.
But wait a second, I mean, what we've just done is while everybody was talking, I asked Ms. Callaway to add the $37,000 for contributions that we just mentioned, and I asked her to add the $976,000 that part that schools asked for.
That's 2 more cents on the tax rate almost.
So we're looking at 2.11, if I'm reading their numbers right, just for schools, and .008, or almost a penny. Yeah.
I did want to mention this, I did add column L this year, so it's a little bit different that you can, that is the personal property impact. So column K and L should be looked at independently, and you can add or subtract pennies from either column to make up differences in revenue.
But right now, it's $1 million more with just the, don't shake your head, it's $1 million more with the meals and Chromebooks and the contributions.
They're going to be coming out with pitchforks and torches to my house. We'll do 2 more cents.
I think Monday and Wednesday would be sufficient for the work we have left. That would be my thought.
Yeah, I do too. I agree with you.
Monday,
And unless
Well, you're not here the 28th, right?
Right, unless it's Tuesday and Wednesday of next week.
I might be able to make the 20th. I'll just move my schedule around on Monday.
But again, these are just proposed changes. It doesn't mean that we will accept them. And I think there are suggestions of how to lower that tax rate.
And I know that Ms. Steele has in her budget, and we hadn't even got to unassigned fund balance. And I'm not saying, and when I look at those two numbers, it's pointing to me, the whole CEP thing is pointing to me, our state legislature needs to do more. And that's why I would look at, looking hard at the unassigned fund balance. And while those could be considered operational, I can see those as one-time expenses because we can figure out a way and just reallocate what we're doing with the unassigned fund balance and do it that way to mitigate this big hole that we're getting ready to try to put in it if we fund it from recurring general fund dollars, because this is telling me I've got to get on Delegate Hodges, Delegate Green, Senator McDougal and go, we need more money for this program at the schools because it works so much better when it's there. And for us to now have to go back to funding it at this rate is, it's with the money that they have, they need to be doing this.
We do have the money from the manna from heaven that can pay for the school the school Chromebooks and that's what Carol called it.
Yeah, but I mean, I see these as all scenarios that we need to discuss because there are many scenarios that were placed out here, which one of those was the manna from heaven. And what do we do with that?
It does sound good, doesn't it?
But I mean, there's other things, the pay raises, COLA, when to institute it, whether it's 3%, 2% in a raise. I mean, all those things I think need to be put on the table to keep the proposed tax increase as low as we can, okay?
Dr. Ledoux, you're going to come up with an idea of how many Chromebooks that would buy, correct?
We would provide information as far as how much. So over the next 24 hours or so, I'll provide sort of a tier-led way to replace what there is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Now, normally this device have a lifespan. We know that Chrome will start going 3-4 years. You've reached the end of the lifespan, so that is why we're doing it in 1/3. But certainly we could extend it out.
So this number is 1/3.
Approximately 1/3.
Okay.
That's correct.
So, if we were to put anything on unassigned fund balance, I would say that would be the only thing I would agree to, not the food, but because that's that is a true one-time purchase. But if we were to sit there and figure out, while you're doing these numbers, determine how many Chromebooks should be purchased annually, so we don't have such a big nut at one time that we have to cover.
Certainly, we'll provide a total replacement cycle over a period 3, 4, and 5 years, so we have those options.
Okay, thank you.
Can I,
Thank
since
you.
you're there, how much was in your budget for replacement of school buses? Was it 1.4 or 1.2 million?
I would have to defer.
I think it's 1.3, and the suggestion that we had was that they maybe look at taking away one bus and using that for the fleet vehicles they need.
Okay. I'm just wondering, again, looking at ways that we can keep the tax rate as low as we can, because as Phil said, it's going to be a difficult year as to what we do and how much that tax rate has to be. Trying to keep it as low as possible, that makes it, something that we can deal with. Anything we can do to reduce costs would be helpful.
You've got to remember, we've got to make up the recurring costs from last year's unassigned fund balance that we put into the budget.
So, Dr. Ledoux, when, let's say you procure these Chromebooks, do you procure them through the state system? That'll probably cost $1,200 a piece, whereas Best Buy, they're only $399. How do you buy the Chromebooks? Can you purchase from Best Buy these Chromebooks for $3.99 a copy?
It's a great question. It is a competitive process, and they are state contract. Those Chromebooks are not in the thousands; they're in the hundreds. From my understanding, they're relatively priced well within the market. We would not waste taxpayers' money by buying the most expensive product, but a reasonable product, and tack on to what other school divisions have done to make sure we get the best value.
The fund balance is taxpayers' dollars, and so I'd be willing to use more fund balance to balance this budget than raise taxes.
So you all.
But the problem with that is, Mr. Bazzani, is once you do it, you're talking about recurring funds, just like, instead of bonuses or instead of a salary increase, you want to give bonuses because it's a one-time. But when we're sitting there with different items that are recurring, it comes out of fund balance, so it's going to recur next year either way. So you take it out of unassigned fund balance, it's going to have to come out of the unassigned fund balance next year somewhere else. Either way, the unassigned fund balance is basically the county savings account, and you don't want to do recurring funds out of the unassigned fund balance.
And I would remind the board that at the proposed budget, you're at 15.6, so you've already dipped below the 16% with.
So $500,000 for Chromebooks?
Yes, if we added $526,240 for the Chromebooks, we would take our unassigned fund balance down to about 15.2%.
We're in agreement on Monday and Wednesday?
Monday, Wednesday. Please. Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, and I just, somewhere when I was doing things, the Wednesday popped up without my awareness. So are you talking about this Wednesday or Wednesday?
No, next week.
Monday and Wednesday next week.
Monday, Wednesday, and next
Okay.
week.
Okay, the ones you're, all right, I was a little bit afraid we meant the 23rd, so thank you. I wasn't going to be here.
Are we doing we're not doing it? Yep, let's hold up. No 24. That's right.
28th and the 30th, correct? 28th and the 30th are both dates, they're already,
Right, this Thursday.
So, but we need to make sure that Mr. Bazzani's gonna be there then.
I'm gonna call the school. I've got a meeting in that evening, so I'll see if I can get out of it for that day, for that meeting.
You won't be here Thursday.
Meetings 28, 29, and 30? No,
28 and 30.
just 28 and
28
30.
and 30.
do you want to leave the option of the budget adoption also occurring at the end of the discussion on the 30th? Or do you want to add that to your,
That's what I was going to ask you, is it? Yes, the 30th. Leave it there, and then we can continue to the 5th, correct?
okay.
Yes. Okay.
Do we need a motion for that, or?
But do we need to
Not doing
have,
24. Not
do we
doing
need to
24.
vote on canceling Thursdays?
Thursdays.
It was proposed all.
So move.
Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to discuss? No, Mr. Chair. Anything else? And what is next on our agenda?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We adjourn.